Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. We're not 6 minutes late today, but thank you for everybody holding off yesterday. And a massive shout out to Patrick McGilp and John Hughes. I watched it as an audience member. I listened to it. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. And Patrick definitely is a magnificent host. The 6 minute delay was my fault because I didn't give him a code. And if you don't have a code, you can't get in. But you could have guessed what the code was. I'm pretty sure everybody in the audience knows what the code is. JP, you're not in the same room as me. There has been a rumour that we actually sit side by side when we do the Thursday Bulletin, and you have absolutely blown that out the water because you're in a different setting. Where are you?
I'm in King Tut's Wawa out of necessity. I had a meeting that ran up until a couple of minutes ago, so it was either not be on the show or be on the show and be in somewhere else. So I have to be here.
Brilliant.
So I just brought it with me, but kind of a wholly depressing hour, not for the business reasons, but I had my diary. I've got a physical diary, and it's a page per day diary. So I had to open on today's date.
You're speaking my language.
Aye, right. So the date to the left was obviously yesterday, which would be the 22nd. And on the 22nd, obviously at the start of the season, I write through all the Celtic stuff in my diary, because it's important. And I'd written on that date, Champions League, and it was scored out. And then sitting in front of me was Sturm Graz, Europa League. Yeah. And it was like, if ever there was such a cruel reminder of our fall from grace, then there it is.
In black and white. And if it's written down, it exists. And I remember seeing an excerpt, sorry guys and girls, this is slightly music related, from the King Tut's diary back in 1993. You'll know the date, sometime in May, I believe. And Oasis were added to a very specific bill on that evening after they somewhat crashed the bill.
You mean this one?
That's the one. That's the one. Big shout out to members of the various bands who were actually on that bill, some of whom support Celtic. There you go, we came full circle. We do have a big game tonight. I say big game because I do place quite a bit of importance on it for a few different reasons. Before we do that, though, JP, that's a cracking T-shirt you've got on, by the way. I just got a wee glimpse of it. Look at that. Yeah, up the Celts. Up the Celts. There you go. You can get that from the Acsom shop. Anyway, let's talk vehicular analogies to start off with. We've got a few people on Acsom who like an analogy from time to time, JP. Brendan Rodgers gave one at the weekend, tried to explain it yesterday. Where are you with this? Was it a dig at his players? Was it a dig at the fact that we weren't showing enough tempo and pace, as was described yesterday? How did you take it?
It was a bit clunky to further push in a car narrative. I could see where he was trying to go with it. I don't doubt that anybody could see where he was trying to go with it, and the actual sort of are probably true and carry weight. However, to be delivering that like that is probably not the best idea. I would have thought. I felt a little bit uncomfortable hearing it again, but it's not something I'm going to dwell on. Like, no. Ultimately, I could see what he was trying to say. Bizarrely, I went to see the new Tron film last night with the 9 Inch Nails soundtrack, amazing. But there was a scene where I was like, is this some sort of weird parody that I'm watching playing out? So for anybody that doesn't know, Tron is a digital character set in a digital world, and then one of the characters, Ares, comes out of the digital world and goes into the real world in that film, and he gets into a car, and it's a Honda Civic.
No,
I'm not joking. And he gets in the car, and he's obviously he's a digital character, and it's a novelty for him to be in an actual real car as opposed to like a light cycle or something in the grid. And he just turns to the girl that's in the car when he goes, Honda Civic, this is a classic, right? And then he proceeds to absolutely boot it and fly through loads of traffic, like driving it, funnily enough, like a Ferrari. What's the song that's soundtracking the scene? Genuinely, what's the song that's soundtracking the scene? Think of a song that could be Celtic related.
By 9 Inch Nails?
No, not by 9 Inch Nails. Something that gets played at Celtic Park.
That would fit into this. Give me it, because it's not like the people sing.
Depeche Mode, Just Can't Get Enough.
Oh, there you go. That makes sense, actually, because of the time of the original movie. By the way, can I just say, JP, it brings back, you remember the term that was used during COVID, an analog manager in a digital world. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what you've just nailed there. And I'm starting to wonder if we're an analog football club in a digital football world. And it's time that we came into the digital age. I mean, that's incredible that you watched that last night. You might have watched it any other time in your life, and because of things happening at Celtic, it wouldn't have made the same kind of sense, the same parallels. But I'm actually on the same page, yes. Can't get enough. Now, just can't get enough of Celtic in Europe, Celtic tonight. Celtic a few weeks ago saying that obviously getting into the Europa League group stages was something of an achievement that they counted in 19 of the last 20 seasons, JP. When I think about Celtic in Europe, like your diary, I think Celtic in the Champions League. Now, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I do appreciate that some people don't watch every single day. The point I've made is we need to get away from this constant obsession with winning 10 in a row, and we should focus on having 10 Champions League games. That should be the 10 that we focus on every season. And that should be on the whiteboard. That should be on Michael Nicholson's whiteboard as a season-by-season aim. That's one of your aims, right? Do you think there's a sense sometimes, not just with Celtic or football, that people don't make big games because they see them as unachievable and they want to make sure that they make comfortable aims, that they can achieve? Because for me, where Celtic is right now, and I've said this before, I'm going to, stick by it until I'm proven otherwise. We should not be viewing Celtic as a parochial club. We should not be focusing on the parochial derby that we had with Rangers. We shouldn't be focusing on what they're doing. We should be focusing on much larger ambitions. And for me, it is Champions League. We know we're not there this season, JP, but why do you think that isn't on Michael Nicholson's whiteboard?
Why do I think that the fact that we're not there is on his whiteboard?
It's not even a target. We don't target 10 Champions League games a season. We target some kind of involvement in European football. And that was proven when he answered the question at the meeting that we had with him a few weeks ago, almost as if it was a gold star. The fact that we had competed in the Europa League group stages and the Champions League group stages, it almost put them on a level. As long as we're playing group stage European football, that's good enough. Well, it's not good enough.
I've just been in a meeting talking about targets and progression and, looking to sort of gain on a previous year and everything else. How on earth could you look at this season and we've regressed? We've not progressed, we've regressed. So how does that match up with a world class in everything that we do? It doesn't. You want to progress. You asked me at the start of this season what I saw as my realistic targets. Obviously, winning the league would be the main one, but then as a close second would be to compete in the Champions League. And when I say compete, I mean compete, win points, negotiate difficult ties better than we have done before, not get beat 7-1 off a team, and maybe accrue one more point than we did last year, which would make the difference in terms of the level of opposition that we would get if we were to get out of the group stage, which again was something I said. I wasn't saying, that you asked me and I said I don't expect us to maybe win that tie, but at least get to that point. We're not even in the competition. I know. So we've completely and utterly regressed on that front, and and we're living in real time of that regression. It's every day is a reminder. Sitting at that meeting there and now was a reminder, looking at my diary on today's date and then looking at yesterday's date with a line through it, like that's regression in technicolor or black and white as it happened to be, but then that's more appropriate, isn't it? Black and white, it's more old fashioned, archaic than us in a modern world. So yeah, you have to live with that. You have to live with the fact that, as I said last week, Celtic are creating Facebook events for a European game when they've never had to do that for any Champions League games. The Champions League games sell themselves. This game tonight isn't selling itself because there's enough people, there's enough I don't know about depression, but there's enough malaise about there's enough malaise about the support and their attitude that this is considered a far lesser competition. And are we entitled by expecting to be in the Champions League? I don't think so. We were the champions. So
entitled's become a bad word, almost like, a term that is used to hit you with a stick. Let's change it and say expectation. Let's change it and say standard. I mean, it means the same thing. What I expect from my football club is an expectation. Does that mean I'm entitled to it? Well, no. But you know what? See if that's your mindset. Let's talk top tier. Top tier. What's the top tier European competition? It's clear. It's the Champions League. What's the top tier European football competition? Right, regardless, it's a Champions League. It's bigger than all the top leagues in Europe. The Champions League. People bang on about Super Leagues, British leagues, which is on the whiteboard, bizarrely enough. The mythical whiteboard, right? Forget that. The Champions League's where it's at. That's your top tier. Now, remember that terminology, top tier, JP. There's a fear amongst Celtic that if we try to expand and we try to push on, we'll be held back by Scottish football, because what happens let's use Ronnie Dyler's time as an example, if we don't get into the Champions League, top tier competition, the top tier at Celtic Park is empty, right? But those two things work hand in hand. You get into the Champions League and it won't be empty. So get into the Champions League. Now, there's no certainty that you're going to be there, but we win the league virtually every season. We did 9 in a row. We've now done 4 in a row. Right? So it's 13 out of 14 years. And I hope that we can get the 14th out of 15 years this season. That isn't etched in stone yet. Absolutely. But in order to make sure that the top tier's full, get into the top tier competition, JP, that needs to be your vision. None of this nonsense about saying, Europa League, that's part of our vision. No, it's not. It cannot be. Because if you aim that low, that's where you're playing. And you look at your diary, Champions League scored out, Europa League, that's where we are. And that, by the way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what it is. Don't prepare for the qualifier, regardless who you're playing. Any game's a banana skin. Any game. Doesn't matter if it's Kairat Almaty. Any game you play in a qualifier, it'll be the same next season. Midtjylland showed us that in Angie's first season. Any team could knock any team out at that stage of the game, right? It's just the way it is in terms of where you are in your season, JP. If you don't have the transfers done in time, you're going in and you're underprepared. That's why we got knocked out. Underprepared, right?
I don't think there's no argument against that, right? You can fire shots off at the manager if you like, and people have done and will continue to do, and they were doing after Sunday, of course. But there is you cannot realistically argue that we didn't prepare like we should have done for those games. And that's now casting a shadow over the entire season, because everyone feels like it feels like the starting pistol's gone off, and then we're in this sort of state of flux of like, do we just sort of amble back to the starting line, and we're sort of halfway between the finishing line and the start, and everyone's just kind of doing the John Travolta gif, walking into the room, like, where are we? What is our modus operandi here? And there is a constant backdrop of negativity, and the constant backdrop of negativity is there because we've seen this story far too many times. And if Liam Scales said that it is affecting the players in some way, I don't doubt that.
Did you watch it back? Did you watch the full presser?
No, I haven't seen it. No,
this is interesting. I'm sorry to jump in. This is really interesting because see if you don't watch it and you just read the headlines, Scales is having a dig. You watch the interview, he's not having a dig at all. There was one throwaway line, right? One throwaway line that everybody jumped on. If you listen to it back, what he does is he describes it almost like an injury on the park. He says, look, it's just the same as somebody going down for 3 minutes. It's not a problem. But there was one tiny phrase, JP, and every media outlet jumped on that one phrase. And I thought to myself, all right, we're getting a hard time now. The negativity is not coming from the fans, by the way. It's not coming from the terracing. It's coming from the very top of the football club. This isn't a dig. I'm going to bring this one in here. This is a comment that's just come through in relation to the topics of discussion. Now, I've explained this quite a lot at the time. This is a daily bulletin where we talk about every nuance of Celtic, from the history of the football club to who's playing well to the fabric of the jerseys that we regularly release. We talk about everything on here. So the biggest topic of conversation right now isn't who Celtic are playing left back tonight, right? It isn't. We will get to that. But here is a comment that's coming in from Celt 6788. I'm sick to my back teeth hearing about the board. You barely talk about Celtic games or a team these days.
I said that last week to Chris.
We are talking about the here and now. Now, the Celtic team, right, is affected by the Celtic board. The inactivity, not being prepared for the Champions League is why we have this fixture tonight. This is why we're playing tonight. This is why JP said to score at the Champions League from his diary. That is a combination of a dreadful couple of games against Almaty on the park. Granted, there is a shared responsibility, but part of that responsibility is the board. It is ongoing. And whilst it's ongoing, we'll talk about it. Imagine back, here we go, Celtic da, klaxon. Imagine back in the 90s, don't talk about the board. There was plenty of Celtic fans didn't want to hear about it. Plenty of Celtic fans. I remember picking up the Celtic fanzines of the time, and I would much have rather read about the brilliance of Paul McStay at that time in my Celtic supporting life. And all I got was Celtic board, Celtic board, Celtic board. But it had to be done. It had to be discussed. And Celtic fans, the wider fan base, started talking about it because they lit a fuse, JP, the fanzines. I will always hold them in such high regard. They lit a fuse. They educated us as Celtic supporters. And I'm not saying I'm educating anybody, but what I will do is I'll talk about the main topics. One of the main topics is how do we line up tonight? Absolutely. But we started off today talking about why we're in the Europa League. And that is partly, a massive part, down to our inability to be prepared for the Champions League qualifiers. Would you agree with that, JP?
100%. And also, just to hark back to the 90s, I know I've been doing this for a couple of weeks, but obviously interested in the past and how the past affects the present and the future. So how many games, how long ago do you think it was that we've got to this point in the season where we have a number of games where we've drawn a blank in those games? Right, we've drawn a blank in 6 games this season. So the problem was identified by Alan Morrison and others as to the fact that we're not scoring enough goals, and that also sort of ties into the Honda Civic Ferrari argument, in that we've sold Kyogo and never replaced him. We've sold Adam Ida and replaced him with a free transfer, who was never surely a long-term strategy. It was a pin the tail on the donkey signing, which has yielded okay results so far, but nobody's sitting here going, is Iheanacho going to score 25, 30 goals by the end of the season? Because right now it's going to take a hell of a second half of the season for him to get to that. I just don't see it coming from any other avenue. We were putting on Johnny Kenny and relying on him, a guy that we signed 4 years ago and who's played less than, 30 games for Celtic probably.
He's had 2 development loans, JP, one of which I watched pretty closely, and that was at Queen's Park, where he was a failure. Yeah. And the thing with that was, there was the point, and it needs to be made, that he was homesick at that stage. It was in his early part of coming over to Scotland. They went back to Ireland to build up his confidence to start doing what he's good at doing. And he's proven that he's good at doing it at a level, JP. And that level isn't Celtic.
No, of course. And that's what we've always sort of labelled about, Yang's level might have been Birmingham City had he got that move. He might have been rejuvenated and doing well at that point, at this point in time, had he got that move. But the fact is that he was willing to be let go by the club, the manager, recruitment team were willing to let him go, and then they pulled that away from him. And then all of a sudden he's back in the firing line on Sunday, where clearly, as I've said for quite a while now, I didn't think he was good enough. I got pelters from people from saying, when I said I don't want to hear that announcer saying Yang again, and then people, I think you're incredibly harsh on Yang, that he did more when he came on and blah, blah, blah. Well, he didn't do anything on Sunday, and I'm not saying that the entire defeat lies at his feet.
He done less than 0.
Yeah, well, it was what it was. But going back to the 90s, 1993 was... well, you'll remember that season we had 3 managers, Liam Brady, Frank Connor, Lou Macari, and we had 6 games where we drew a blank. They were a 0-0 draw against Rangers, which is eerily what we've had this season. We had a defeat at home to Aberdeen, 1-0. We drew 0-0 away with Young Boys Bern, obviously turned it round in the home leg and got through. We had, ominously, a 1-0 defeat to Rangers in the League Cup semi-final. Ominous. We were beat ominously 1-0 off Hearts at Tynecastle, didn't score. And we drew 0-0 at home to Kilmarnock, so you could switch out Hibs for that in the home league tie against Hibs. The strikers that we were relying upon in those games, do you know who the four were?
Right, go back to 93. So at that time, I'm wondering, Frank McAvenny had come back to the club.
Correct.
Second spell.
Ill-fated second spell, it has to be said.
Yeah, version 2. Version 2 of Charlie Nicholas was still there.
Also ill-fated.
Yeah. Andy Payton.
Correct.
And now the thing with this is, I was a fan of Jerry Creaney.
You're correct. That's right.
And was he still there? Was he still there?
Yep. They're the four strikers, right? Andy Payton made 7 appearances, scored 2 goals. He was away by, I don't know, was it September or October he left the club? Obviously, when there was no fixed transfer windows. Jerry Creaney made 22 appearances, scored 6 goals. Frank McAvenny made 16 appearances, scored 6 goals. And Charlie Nicholas made 42 appearances and scored 9 goals. So that is the last time that we were as short in the goal scoring front as we are now. So you're going back to a time where there was a seismic demand for the board to change. Yep,
absolutely. And by the way, when you think about the talent that we've had very, very recently, JP, and we're going back to 93 to find a comparison for this season. I think it's quite stark. I'm going to bring in the comments. I don't bring comments up just so that I can try and pick away at them. There's a healthy debate to be had around all things Celtic. So bring it on. Disagree, agree, give us a different view. It's all on the table. So here we go. Michael Kennedy, you're in. It shouldn't always be about football, but we can't cover our eyes and hope it all sorts itself out. Now, I understand why people do this. I'm in various Celtic chat groups, JP, where there's a lot of people who just want to go and watch Celtic. They just think, support the team. Everything will be fine. Support the team. Everything won't be fine if it continues going down this path. It absolutely will not be fine. And that's why I think that what we're doing right now, JP, if we didn't have the technology to talk about this on a live stream and we met up for a cuppa or once a week or a pint or whatever once a week, this is a discussion we would have. We would talk about Celtic and we would talk about music and we would also talk a wee bit about film. This is the conversation Celtic fans have at work, on supporters' buses, in the boozers, even at school. This is the chat you have. When I meet up with my old man, what do I talk about? Celtic. My brother came in this morning to do a job. What do we talk about? Celtic. This is what it is. All aspects of Celtic. Everything from who's performing and not on the park and off the park. And it's always going to be the way. And I'll tell you something, when the day comes, right, that we're not talking about the board, that's because the board are doing their job right. And we're not focusing on them. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. I'm not sure we're going to do many specials where we're saying, all hail the board. JP, let's talk about how fantastic the board is. I don't think that happens in football, I'm afraid. What happens is, if the board's doing the job, they don't get spoken about and they get an easy life. I think that's the way it is. Seamus McKenna, you're in. Feel like this squad has to hang in until January transfer window. If Celtic haven't planned for January now, then we're in trouble. I'll tell you something that I got yesterday was a wee bit of info around here's the thing, JP. It is modern football, but the transfer windows now, you were talking about 93 where there was no windows. You could sign players when you wanted to sign them. But transfer windows now are such a big focus and such a big part of any football club that doesn't produce its own players. It's that simple, because instead of just tinkering with your squad and fine-tuning your squad with a player here or there, you look at Celtic signings over the piece, if you were to say season by season across the 2 windows. We sign a hell of a lot of players. There are a number of players that come to Celtic every single season. This is the world we live in. We need to sign more when we don't produce our own. So there is a focus of it. Everything works hand in hand. That's why we're talking about the board. We're now talking about the academy. There is a focus on the academy. So what's been happening there is obviously they've made an incredible financial investment up at Barrowfield. Seen the same glimpses as everybody else. There was a really good video that was pulled together. I think Tom Boyd, Roy Aiken, Paul McStay went and visited the complex. I drove down the lane myself last week. I drove down the lane to have a look at it. So I'm really interested in what we've been doing down there. But that's just the facilities. For me, football's about people, right? So you need the facilities, you absolutely do. But you also need the people. So let's talk about what we've been doing there. So the other year, a couple of years ago, we developed a new role, and it was called a pathway manager. If you talk to anybody who has been at Celtic and their parents, JP, it's one of the biggest criticisms of recent times. There's no pathway. So we created a role, and it was Darren O'Day who had that. He's away to Swansea. Sean Maloney gets the role. Now, the Sean Maloney thing, if you don't tell us what's happening, I think, again, this is typical of being a football fan. You make up your own mind, JP. If you're not given the information, you've got your own theory around things. So I don't know what people think about Sean Maloney, but what I'm hearing is that he is absolutely tearing it up at the academy, right? And that's maybe because of the fact that he's been operating now. You could look at his record as a manager, right, at Wigan and Hibs and say he's a rubbish manager. You could say that. But if you look at his entire coaching career and the level that he's been coaching at, when you're talking, you bring in the Martinez link and all that, and you look at the level that he's been coaching at, JP, he has had an insight into elite level when it comes to football clubs, national teams, elite level, what's expected at that level. And I think that's what surprised a few people, JP, when he was given that role, because it wasn't like Darren O'Day, who it was one of the things where he's retired for the game and he gets a wee gig at Celtic. This was somebody who had already done a fair bit in the world of coaching and himself as a manager, almost taking steps back to be a pathway manager. So what I'm hearing, before I say this, I'll qualify it. I've spoken to the parents and agents of some of the young Celtic players who have left the football club, having had very little first team experience, JP, and primarily have gone down to England, right? So 3 in particular that I've spoken to people who were involved there. And one of the biggest criticisms was this lack of a pathway. It's a big criticism. And when it's the parents or the agent, you kind of, and there's a trend where there's no link between the three players I'm talking about, and you're getting this individual information. You're thinking, how on earth can there be no pathway? There needs to be a plan. You need to go into your work, JP. You've just had a planning meeting. You need to go into your work, and there needs to be a plan. What's happening next month, next year, in 3 years and 5 years? And that didn't exist. So we put Maloney in place. Maloney's tearing it up by all accounts, right? Now, this might not be your bag, but he's bringing parents in and giving them big, in-depth presentations on the pathway for their kids, which you might think is something that should happen anyway. Apparently, it wasn't happening at Celtic. Parents,
well, I mean,
kids.
credit where credit's due. He's an upgrade on Darren O'Day. Then that's what kind of what you would expect. But then we're not. So fair enough. That's okay, and that will maybe yield long-term benefits. But in terms of this season, we've not upgraded this season in terms of the first team progression, all of that. So whilst you quite rightly can wave the flag for Sean Maloney doing that, and that's good to hear. I would expect that. That's kind of,
we should have been doing that a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, we should have been doing that years ago. Let's be
honest.
So
we'll see the results of that in what, 3 to 5 years?
Probably.
Like
Yeah. Aye. And this is the thing that frustrates me, because that's great work, but it's too late. If you want me to be ultra negative or critical of that, it's too late. And yeah, we won't see the benefit, certainly tonight. We won't see the benefit this season. Hopefully we'll see the benefit down the line, JP. So that kind of elite mentality, if you like, is something that we should have throughout the football club. And that takes in, and the reason I brought up the academy, the only reason you need to buy players is because we don't produce enough players. I mean, that's just the basics of football. So we need to rely on good recruitment. And that is where the issue undoubtedly lies, where you're making comparisons between the firepower of this team compared to the team back in '93, because that was the kind of bottom ebb, if you like, of my Celtic supporting life. This is where it was tapering off to a point where we might have actually collapsed as a football club. So for those who didn't want to talk about the board, if the board's not right, the club's not right. If the club's not right, you might not have a club. So you've got to talk about the board. You've got to focus on the board. There was plenty of Rangers fans walking about with their hands over their eyes about their board and the financials and everything that was getting done with the football club for a number of years. And we all know how that spiraled out of control. So I'm going to bring in some more of the comments coming in, and also we'll talk about our proposed or predicted lineups for tonight. JP, I'll be interested to hear what you're thinking. So we've got Bobby Sutherland, in you come. We are a Europa League level team, and that's that, right? Bobby,
so just accept that.
Bobby, right? I'm bringing this up because I've got something to say. I'm going to ask you first, JP. What do you make of this? And it's not a dig at Bobby. A lot of people say that. Kevin Graham says this. A lot of people say this that support Celtic. What's your take on it?
So last season was a complete outlier then. What did we do last season? Punch above our weight? Manager fluked it? Was it a fluke that we got out? Was it all because the draw was kind? We were into the Champions League without qualifying, so there was no, we were there whether we liked it or not. It wasn't a case of we don't want to be here or we've done something special to be here. The thing that we did special to be there was win the league. So I think it's a case of you play what's in front of you, and we played what was in front of us last season, and we got enough points to get out of the group stage. And then we ran a Bayern Munich side very, very close. But you could argue against. You could say, oh well, they always had another gear to go up or whatever. I didn't see any signs of that in the 93rd minute when they were scrambling for a goal that would stop it going to extra time. So was that a fluke? There's other results. You look at the first season, wasn't too great. Beat away and home off Lazio. Hammered off Atletico Madrid, beating away at Feyenoord. Our signpost of that league stage was probably the home draw against Atletico Madrid, where we showed we could go at it with them. But yeah, there are a lot of signs that would back up Bobby's theory. However, I saw enough last season to suggest that we should have at least be going into the Champions League this season fully prepared with a successful squad overhaul, with the players leaving who wanted to leave, and having hungry younger players to come in to take their place. That's what in my mind should have happened, and then we would see whether or not we were a Champions League team or a Europa League team. If we'd done that, if we'd done the business, got into the Champions League, and then still got battered off everybody home and away or whatever, or humiliated, then okay, I would concede to Bobby. But if all that had happened and we got in and then we'd managed to get out of the group stage like we did last season, then that disproves the Europa League level team theory.
Right. And it's a theory and it's an opinion, and I disagree with it. And here's my take on it. So you're talking 1993, JP, right? Where were we in 1993?
By the way, just to add to that, 6 games at this point in the season we had drawn a blank. Where did we finish that season? If you're talking about XG and all that, right? I mean, and I know XG wasn't discussed in 1993. It was 2 letters in 1993. It wasn't a theory or something to base evidence on. But where did we finish that season?
So I'm going to say
fourth.
Right.
So if by this point in the season we are matching the same amount of games that we drew a blank in, that's not very. That doesn't spell good news. No, it doesn't, does it?
Doesn't bode well. But also 93 is quite interesting if we're talking about Europe, because it was the first season of the Champions League, 92-93. Mm-hmm. So we look at Celtic's European history. And like yourself, JP, coming from a similar era, you're brought up with the tales of the fantastic teams of the 1960s and 70s. And they were unbelievable. But when I'm supporting Celtic, you go back to the European Cup campaign of 1979-1980, which was the campaign following 10 men winning the league, right? So 10 men winning the league was Billy McNeil's first season in charge as the manager of Celtic, and it was a memorable season for so many different reasons. The 4-2 game against Rangers obviously was the pinnacle of that. So we qualified for the European Cup as it was then. And in the season, incidentally, in the season that we won, when 10 men won the league, JP, we weren't even playing in Europe. That's how far we had fallen from our European glory days when Billy McNeil was the captain, never mind the manager. So we win the league, we get into Europe, and we actually get to the quarter-final of the European Cup in 1979-80. And that's the Real Madrid. The memorable game at home was 2-0. We went away to the Bernabeu and they beat us 3-0. But from that point up until Martin O'Neill takes over, we're looking at absolute failure in Europe, if you want to just be blunt, right? There's a number of seasons, for example, where there's 2 seasons where we didn't even qualify. 1990-91, 1994-95, which was the season we were in Europe, at Hampden rather, we didn't even qualify. And the fact remains we didn't play in Europe after Christmas until Martin O'Neill came to the football club. So in respect of, are we a Champions League team? Up till Martin O'Neill comes to the football club, Europe's nowhere, JP. It's absolutely nowhere. It's not part of the conversation. It really isn't. We're talking round 3 here, round 2 there. It was absolutely rubbish as a Celtic fan when it came to Europe. Martin O'Neill, he bought differently. There was a different strategy. We bought big and the wages were big, and we ended up in our 3rd European final in 2003, as everybody knows. Now, at that point, I think that's when Europe became part of the conversation. Again, with Celtic fans, because in my Celtic sporting life, it was always looking back. Always looking back. You never expected to do anything. But under Martin O'Neill, you did. You absolutely did. And incredibly enough, some of the group stage Champions League campaigns that O'Neill had were fantastic. You know, getting 9 points in many other seasons would have got you through to the knockout stage. It didn't, because the standard and quality was incredible. You move on to Gordon Strachan, unbelievable record, 2 last 16s in a row. Incredible. When you consider that we had regressed in terms of our spending, JP, and the whole strategy was different. We were buying a lot of domestic players under Gordon Strachan, albeit we brought in guys like Boric and Nakamura and Zaraski. And then from there, you look at, right, when was the next high kind of point? When was the next high point? Neil Lennon, last 16 against Juventus. Right, so you're seeing little spikes, little spikes along the way, Champions League performances. So at this point here, we are a Europa League level team, and that's that. I can't argue this season, Bobby, because that's where we're playing tonight. We're playing in the Europa League. But if that is the mentality or the culture within the club to accept it, then you'll always be a Europa League team. And as JP says, just in February, did we compete, Bobby? I'll ask you to come back in. Did we compete in the Champions League last season? Do you believe that we competed? I think we did. We got the magical 10 fixtures, JP. Forget Super Leagues. Forget British Leagues. 10 games in the Champions League, season upon season for Celtic, should be the target. And if you get the 10 games, JP, you can build everything from the academy to your football department, which takes in recruitment, to your stadium, to your fan engagement.
Well, 10 games repeatedly will eventually lead to 12 games.
Of course. Yeah, it will eventually. Yeah. Because of the financials coming in, JP, you're attracting a better quality and calibre of player because you've got a track record at that level. There's players that won't sign for you if you're not in the Champions League. Absolutely correct. And only then, over a period of time, do you see that benefit. So I get what Bobby says. There's loads of Celtic fans in the comment section will say, well, of course we're a Europa League team. That's where we're playing tonight. That's absolutely in the short term we are. I can't argue with that. But as a club and the vision on the whiteboard has to be Champions League 10 games a season, JP, in order for us to progress.
It does, and that's what I think any Celtic fan who's disillusioned at the moment, that's one of the main reasons why they're disillusioned, because they see the potential, they see what we did last season, they see what we've done in seasons before, they see other clubs of varying sizes. I mean, like, you look at, we know we're constantly benchmarking ourselves, and rightly so, against clubs in Europe who have a similar level of fan base and have done similar things in Europe. But we measure ourselves against them, and we see them making that consistent progress. Like, I'm sure you could do. If you were, I could do it. It took me a while to go back through all those seasons. I just went through Celtic's Celtic Wikipedia until I got to a point where I found a season where at this point we'd drawn a blank 6 times. It took me half an hour to an hour, say. But I'm sure you could go through, if you picked, say, 10 clubs in Europe and then went back through the last sort of 10, 15 years or whatever, and measured their Champions League qualification and how it arrived. Did they arrive via qualification, the rounds or the knockouts, or did they arrive via direct qualification? And then say, well, look, they've had 9 out of the last 10 years they've been in the Champions League. They doing? Is it because they've got so much more money than us? We're not talking about Juventus and Real Madrid and Barcelona. We're talking about Feyenoord, Rapid Vienna, Ajax, Bruges, those type of teams. Maybe take Ajax, but they're probably closer to that top tier. But Feyenoord, for example, Feyenoord seem to be in the Champions League most times, don't they?
Yeah, they do, JP. And I think you can look at progressive teams like that because we played them 2 seasons ago. We'll be playing them this season. But I think over the last wee while, the last few seasons, 3 teams that have jumped out at me have been Copenhagen, Club Brugge, and probably Bodo Glimt. And I think as a football club, you look at what they're doing right and what you can implement yourself. Study what they're doing. What's their model? Why are they successful? And then start to implement it at Celtic. That's what you do in order to grow. So, yes, I think the Champions League and the Europa League argument will rage on. My takeaway from today is get into the top tier tournament and the top tier of your stadium looks after itself. Simple as that, right? You don't have to worry about packing at your stadium,
it will be
selling your season tickets.
It will be interesting to see the attendance tonight because there's clearly been a clamour to try and sell tickets. And speaking to someone that I play football with on Tuesday, they were a little bit kind of put off by the £45 price ticket. The price of the ticket, they were kind of like, I got offered a spare, but it was 45 quid. That's quite pricey. Maybe they could have looked at the individual tickets. I know that they obviously have to offer a concession for a season ticket holder. Mine is £35, and I appreciate that is the lowest that they can go in terms of the pricing strategy. I believe that to be the case, unless someone's fed me false information. But that apparently Celtic have gone to the lowest point in terms of pricing that they can. Like they can't go. They can't say, oh well, here's £10 tickets for season ticket holders. Like they just can't. They can't physically do that. So we can't beat them with a stick for that. But in terms of if you know that you're possibly going to struggle to sell tickets for this competition, then a more intelligent pricing strategy beyond the season ticket holders might have been something. And then obviously it's not the concession thing isn't going to happen for tonight's game, but it is going to happen for Utrecht and Roma.
The thing as well, JP, everything does bleed in. When you're talking about the football club, I know that there was comments earlier saying stop talking about the board. Everything bleeds into it, right? So you want to talk about engagement. You can't just come out of nowhere when you need to sell a ticket to start engaging with fans. You need to have built that relationship through some kind of online hub, some kind of community, so that when you then try to sell them a ticket, that's just on top of everything else that you've done to communicate and engage with the fan base. So that's something, again, that we need to improve on for the long term. But in terms, again, of the Champions League, let's look at that third European final that Celtic had in 2003. And there's people, you included, who will rank that amongst one of the best journeys I've ever had as a Celtic fan, right? And we talk to guys like Chris Sutton and John Hartson, Martin O'Neill on a regular basis, Stilian Petrov, absolutely privileged to talk to these people fairly regularly, JP. And it is a massive part of the discussion because it was such a big, high point of Celtic's European endeavours, especially in the modern day. If you want to talk about this century, it was incredible. And, to have a run like that, JP, could be brilliant. It could breathe life into your campaign and all the rest of it. So it's not an entitlement where we're saying, forget the Europa League. If we were doing well in the Europa League, there would be excitement, there would be interest in the tickets if we were playing well and we were sitting there and it's like, actually, we might have we might make a fist of this campaign in the Europa League. I'll go back to a couple of weeks ago, Patrick McGilp, who hosted so well yesterday. And he spoke about, we should always target that 10 games in the Champions League, which is kind of my mantra, right? But if we don't, for whatever reason, we don't get there, JP, we should look to win the Europa League. And that's the kind of vision that I want from a football club. Why not? Let's try and get to the final of this thing.
Probably would be more excited about, say we'd recruited as well as we could, and that wasn't good enough for the Champions League. That we'd brought in players in time, and we'd still failed to overcome Kairat over those two legs. You'd be like, okay, well, we gave it our best shot. They were just better than us. Whatever. I saw they got a point on the table the other night against Paphos, so they're not going to finish as the worst ever Champions League side in history, which is a title that was afforded to someone else. But you could handle it if that was the case. If we had recruited well, but then if you had recruited well and it just wasn't good enough for the Champions League, then you would think that it would be above the level, or not above the level, but it would allow us to be in the Europa League with a fighting chance.
Exactly.
And it's not, though, because not only did we not recruit well enough for those Champions League qualifiers, we haven't recruited well enough for the Europa League.
And we've not.
We don't have firepower on the right-hand side. We don't have strikers that are going to deliver us the level of goals that have delivered us in the last 25 to 30 years since 1993. You're going back to 1993 to find a shot shy, a side that is as similarly shot shy as this one.
And by the way, honorary mention to Frank Connor, who during that particular season went unbeaten when he was the interim manager between Liam Brady and Lou Macari. On the subject then of the players on the park, JP, right? We go into tonight's game. And on Tuesday, I was talking to Lawrence. I disagreed with him, which is nothing new. That's what we do. And he's like, forget the Europa League. Forget it. Focus on Sunday. I don't think you can focus on Sunday by forgetting the Europa League. I think by taking tonight's game seriously, you are focusing on Sunday. It's not about resting players. I'm not interested in resting players. I want players to be fit and firing. I want the momentum. I want the rhythm. I want the confidence, right? And you're not going to get that on a training park. You only get that through games and winning games and playing well and scoring
100%,
goals.
Yeah.
So tonight for me is all about Sunday.
Well, I mean, there's so many examples of European results that have bled into the performances of league games, whereby, I mean, we've had it for us and against us. We've gone away on a Thursday night somewhere far flung, maybe not Kazakhstan, but we've gone somewhere away, had the travelling, got back, and then had maybe Ibrox on the Sunday. I remember the game in the Seville season. Did we not go there and win?
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure there was Beach Ball Sunday was at Ibrox.
There wasn't much complaints about the beach balls on the park, but anyway, that's another discussion.
But maybe from Lorenzo Amoruso, I remember him trying to stamp on one, and it was so full of air he couldn't get any purchase on it, and he just had to do it about 2 or 3 times. It was quite I don't know if that was caught on camera at the time, but I definitely saw it in my own eyes. But so the whole idea of like just abandoning Europe and playing a reserve side tonight ahead of keeping everybody fresh for Sunday. My thoughts on Sunday, obviously I was there. That was a really, really strange atmosphere. There was a malaise. You could feel the malaise. I don't know if it was just this sort of. I kept thinking of the Albert Kidd song, "A visit to Dens is so eerie today," and there was an eeriness about the support and just the atmosphere, the weather. You'd asked me last Thursday what I thought about the game, and I said I think it'll be a sticky game. I don't think it's the way you need. If you've got eyes and you've been watching Celtic this season and you've seen how shot shy they are in front of goals, then you're not really going there expecting a mammoth victory or anything like that. I was going there expecting it to be quite a tight game. There's been tight games in recent times at Dens Park. Stephen Presley said when he came in, he's not a guy to win you trophies, but he can win you one-off games, can't he? So that's what was. I think that was his point at the time in the presser that he got a bit chastised for. But what I was thinking in the aftermath of Sunday was, if there was any motivation needed for those players, that is what can happen if you're off it, then you lose a 37-year-old record. The last time Celtic lost to Dundee at Dens Park, 3 weeks prior to that, I went to my first Celtic game. That's how
That's an age. That's an age.
When they said the date, I was like, September the what? And then I looked up the Celtic Hamilton game in 1988, and I was like, oh, that's 3 weeks after my first Celtic game with my dad. So
it's incredible. It's incredible.
You suffer the humiliation. You watch the Dundee players celebrate quite rightly like they've won a cup. You know, I mean, it was a huge scalp. I mean, probably a lot of them didn't. Maybe they did realise how long it had been. Maybe Presley had used that as motivation to, you know, if we get a goal up and they're struggling because they're everybody can see we're not scoring goals. It's not a secret. Only he needs to look at is the fixtures that we've not scored in, and of which there was 5 prior to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
If he needs any motivation, or to give them any motivation to throw themselves at shots, and that happened a lot. You know, there was the Hatate shot near the end where the guy gets his ass in the way basically to stop a goal, and there was other shots blocking McGregor's shots, Teneke. There was a lot.
Hibs did that to us. Remember, nothing each game. They threw everything in front of them.
We played significantly better against Hibs.
We did. Created far more chances.
Yeah, but but just going back to that, I mean that humiliation that they would have felt at the final whistle, and then when the records are thrown up in front of you about how it's been 37 years and all the rest of it. Like, if you are, no matter what you are in terms of where you want to be or how many trophies you've won at Celtic or anything like that, that next game I would be wanting to kick the door in to play another game. And that's why the Europa League is important tonight, because that's why I want to see from every player that they're playing this like it's a cup final.
Yeah.
You know? And that's
leadership. It's leadership, JP.
Yeah.
We've touched a wee bit on the UEFA Cup run in 2003. You imagine sitting in that dressing room if you were ever unsure of yourself and looking around your teammates.
Yeah.
The level of leadership was incredible. You had a number of club captains in that dressing room. You had Neil Lennon, Jackie McNamara, Tom Boyd, and Paul Lambert. And then you had guys like Chris Sutton and Tomo and Hartson, guys that you could hang your coat on any day of the week. We need leadership. We need it all the way through the club, by the way. Now, I've put it out there. I've made my feelings known about the meeting 3 weeks ago. Lack of leadership. That's what comes out of that, JP. We need leaders. We need leaders from the very top of the football club right into that dressing room. And we opened up talking about the vehicular analogies and all this nonsense. We need leadership for Brendan Rodgers. Massive leadership. Now, every now and again, I think you need a reset in life, in work, you know, in your thought process and fitness, whatever it might be. You just need a reset. Celtic need that. Now, will it be sparked by making changes? That's the big thing. Sometimes you make personnel changes, sometimes you change the shape. And you get that reset through that way. Is that what's going to happen tonight? Because I can't see a scenario at any point in the future where we start with Tony Ralston and Yang on the right wing. I just can't see it now.
I would certainly hope not. I really don't understand the deference to Ralston over Donovan when Donovan quite clearly proved that he could be the answer to that solution when Ralston was out injured. Mm-hmm. Is it just about seniority? Like, I don't think that should come into it. I think it should come into who's playing the best, and that would probably also apply to Kieran Tierney on the left. And I love the guy. You know, I see him not being as good as he can be at this point in time. Therefore, protect him and play a guy that's just captained his country for the first time, either ever or in over a year. I can't remember if it was that he's not played for his country in over a year, or that he's not captained them for over a year, or if he'd never captained them before, one or the other, or both. But I would definitely look into that. I don't know about wholesale changes. People start talking about dropping Schmeichel for Sinisalo and all the rest of it. I think you still need to keep a level of togetherness ahead of Sunday, because you're not really going to change the team up that drastically ahead of Sunday. But with regards to the defeat, obviously defeats can happen. And if you look back to, as I did, the 23-24 season, Rodgers' first season back, and you look at some of the results in that first half of the season, 0-0 at home against St Johnstone, knocked out the League Cup 1-0 off Kelly, right? 0-0 away to Hibs, 1-1 at home to Motherwell, 2-1 away to Kelly in the league, a home defeat against Hearts, if you remember, which was the real sort of, oh my God, what's going on here? Hearts hadn't won at Celtic Park for 14 years at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what did Brendan Rodgers managed his way out of that situation to win a league, right? But when there was guns trained on him, comments on here, get him to, all of that.
And the mood, JP, at that time, the mood of Brendan Rodgers returning at that time. There were so many people who hadn't been swayed by Brendan's return at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
That was November, wasn't it? Against Hearts, the 2-0 game. So, yeah, I mean, I liken this season to that season more than I do the COVID season.
Well, but it was also off the back of a horrific transfer window.
Yeah.
Shock. Where players had come in that who knows had signed off those players. Brendan Rodgers obviously put on the front to the media that he was really happy with the window, but you're not trying to tell me with how it played out over the next year and a half to 2 years that those players. I mean, did you see the stat about Mike Rochka? He's barely played for Hanover.
I don't think he's made his debut yet. I need to check that. I was just looking at Sriracha there. You're spot on. He captained his country. He captained Uruguay on the 10th, the first of 2 games that he's played 90 minutes for. No, but sorry to interrupt. No, you're spot on. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
so just going back to that time, and you obviously you could fling the European results in at that point as well that we mentioned against Lazio, Feyenoord, everything else. We weren't having a great time, or either domestically or in Europe. But the clamour for people to sack Brendan Rodgers after Sunday, when I've seen evidence like that of him getting us through a really difficult time to win a really important league, by the way, that season.
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't have any faith at all in those in charge to have a succession plan in place at this point in the season if they were to pull the trigger on Brendan Rodgers, which would be remarkable. But it does at times seem like they've set this up to make him carry the can. He said laughingly a couple of months ago, it's normally the manager that's sacked, not the board. Mm-hmm. Almost as if he had a kind of future premonition of what was going on here. I don't know if that is the case or not. But
well, you can add that into some of the other comments. There's people who don't want me at this football club. People don't like me at this football club. And then obviously the Sun leak, which he spoke about when he was asked the question. I think it was Michael Gannon that asked him the question and the follow-up question. So it's not a one-off, JP, when it comes to unrest behind the scenes that you and I will never be party to. He's putting it out there. There are issues here. But I think you make a great point, right? Because it does remind me of that season far more, JP, because after the Hearts game, the 2-0 game in particular, that followed a 2-1 defeat at Kilmarnock, I believe, right? So 2 back-to-back league defeats, which was something of an unwanted record. We hadn't done that in a long time. Hearts beat us 2-0. And it was after the game, if you remember, that the post-match press conference was as disappointing as the result. And Brendan was saying, he was asked if the performance surprised him. He goes, no, it doesn't surprise me. No.
Yeah.
And I remember even like on the Thursday following that, you and me saying, wait a minute, panic stations, there's something wrong here. We might not win the league here. Mm-hmm. That was my thought process. How did he turn it round? Let's think about that. Now, I think that the January transfer was extremely important for one player, and it wasn't Nicholas Kuhn, it was Adam Ida coming in.
100%. Yeah. The much maligned Adam Ida, who everyone just forgets for that loan spell because we shelled out 9 million for him, and he didn't perform like a £9 million player should have in a lot of people's eyes. But yet he wasn't given the sort of room to develop or appreciate the fact that he gave us what he gave us in that January to May period, where he was a massive, massive factor in securing that league title, which was huge. Rangers win that league title. I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens. They certainly they go from driving a Honda Civic to maybe a BMW or something like that. But
this is the thing. And by the way, we go back. This is the reason you got to speak about the board. We go back to the fact that was his first full season at Celtic mired or affected by the transfer fee? I would say to a degree, yes. The opinion of a lot of Celtic fans was £9.5 million for this guy. He scores 20 goals. Where's our 20-goal striker this season, JP? He scores 20 goals last season, right? And when he leaves, you get the sense that the players kind of pushed for this. The agent was talking about a move to Italy and all that. Brendan Rodgers says that it was not a player-driven move. Brendan Rodgers also said when he left the football club, prior to him leaving the football club, no one's leaving until I get a replacement. But he left anyway, so it goes back to...
Pat Bonner said Adam Idah didn't want to leave Celtic.
Didn't want to leave Celtic. There you go. Right. So these are the things behind the scenes that we've got to talk about because it affects the team on the park, JP, big time. And I'm not going to sell a striker until a new one comes in. Well, we sold the striker. They absolutely pulled your drawers down in public there, Brendan. And so all these things are happening in behind the scenes. I'm going to give you my lineup for tonight. It's not actually changed. It's the only thing I've changed is one position. Now, would I like to see us go to 3-5-2 and try something different? Absolutely. But I'm basing this on the formation we've been playing all season, other than a half here or there. I am sticking to Kasper Schmeichel and goals, JP, for the reasons that you've provided, right? Wholesale changes, it's disjointed. I think you need to have... He is a leader. He's maybe not playing brilliantly, right? But he's a leader, and I think we need as many leaders as we can at the moment.
Yeah.
Right back, I'm going to say Alistair Johnston's back.
I think by the noises that he said, I've not seen the whole press conference from yesterday. I think I saw the first 15 minutes. I didn't finish it off, but the very first question he was asked was about Dyson Maeda, and then he said, no, he's not ready. Hopefully he is for Sunday, because I think we'll definitely need him on Sunday. And then he said Alistair Johnston's back, so does
last
he go
Monday?
straight?
He was training last Monday.
Yeah, so you would imagine that maybe he does go in to start. So yeah, okay.
No, but the thing is, I'll bring this up, right? People will disagree, and absolutely, Eddie, I get your disagreement. We've also he does go 3-5-2 in possession. Absolutely, we'll never defend in a 3-5-2. I get that as well. So thanks for bringing that up, Liam. I'm starting with Kasper Schmeichel. AJ will be a tremendous return for me, absolutely outstanding to have him back because I'm talking leadership. He's a leader, right? I'm going Marcelo Sarachi left back. Just after you mentioned the fact that he captained his country, I was having a wee look at Sarachi because he's an interesting one for me. He's a quality player. He's very good offensively. I was looking at some of his transfers in the past where he signs for Leipzig back in 2018. They paid 12 million euros for him. Incredible transfer fee. So this is a guy whose career has kind of gone off-piste, JP, but the quality, I think we've seen a bit of quality there. I'm playing him left back. We need the energy there. But I'm not dropping Tierney. I'm bringing Tierney into the defence. And I think CCV could have quite easily been dropped. I don't think Liam Scales will get dropped tonight, by the way. But I'm playing Kieran Tierney and CCV as your two central defenders. And then as Sarachi's on the overlap, you go to a three at the back, as Liam said. If Johnson's on the overlap, you go for a three at the back, and you just obviously mix and match it from there. I'm playing Arnie Engels. He's coming back in for me, JP. He's playing number 6. I'm pushing Callum McGregor as the number 8 on the left-hand side further up, and I'm bringing Bernardo in because Hatati's not done it for me this season. Ian Acho's starting at centre forward. Tunekte is starting on the right, and Balakwisa starting on the left. That's how I would start tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware until Sunday that Tunekte had played on the right-hand side for Tunisia. So clearly, if he can play there for his country, he can play there for us. Mm-hmm. And I think Chris Boyd was pointing out that he was like, yeah, you spent 5 million on Balakwisa. We spent 10 or 11, the thick end of 11 million on 2 players who play in the same position. That's bad management. That's bad recruitment. That's not like, you could point to the value of those players, but ultimately I would rather have spent 5 million on a left winger and 5 million on a right winger than 5 million on the same guy. But that's because of the Maeda situation that happened and our lack of planning on that front. So this is a complete mess at those that were given the task to do that. But yeah, I think certainly on the right-hand side, I would like to see what they can do. And I really don't want to see Rio Hatate starting tonight. I genuinely don't. I think we've got options in that midfield. It's like somebody said the other day on a podcast, figure out what your best dynamic is.
And switch them in game. You know, like if Tuneke isn't getting enough down the right, switch him for 20 minutes. And I think that is something we need to do. We need to adapt, JP, because it's almost like the tried and tested, keep it going, it'll work, look for the point of attack, pass the ball 100 times to Scales, to CCV, back and back. And it's just like monotonous to the point where we figured it out a long time ago, and all the other teams we're playing now are figuring it out. So we need to adapt in game as well. As Liam said earlier on, yeah, when we're in possession, when we're in attack, we go three at the back, absolutely. But, you know, the wingers, if you're not getting any purchase at all on the left wing, switch it to the right and vice versa. Make sure you're getting something out of one of them. You know, that's something that we should do. Sorry, you that was a wee, was that a doorbell? Do you need to head?
No. It was a phone alarm to remind myself to do something. All good. But no, I think there's got to be a way that you could try and get the two of them into the team at the same time, because they can both offer some. Balikwisha needs the game time, and I think we've seen enough from Tuneke to think that he can give us, even if Tuneke is operating at like 60 to 70% of his ability on the right wing, that's probably a better option than. Well, it's definitely a better option, I think, than anyone else that's playing there, whether it's Forrest or Yang in that argument. And Balikwisha has had so few games on the left to play from the start.
Do you play him somewhere else? Do you play him as a 10? Looking at the games he's played as a senior professional, he can play. He can play behind the front man. I mean, again, you could start him off playing on the right hand side, but he can drift in. We can adapt as the game progresses. If Johnston's great at overlapping, when he's doing that, come inside.
Yeah, I think Johnston being back will help whoever is playing in that position without a doubt, because they'll have. Well, no disrespect to Anthony Ralston, but they'll have somebody that isn't Anthony Ralston playing behind them, and they also won't have the youthful naivety of Colby Donovan. That, by the way, that youthful naivety can be a strength as well as a weakness, because he just had that. He had the bit between his teeth to get forward and shove that boy out of the way to get the winner against Kilmarnock. He drove that winner against Kilmarnock, so I'm certainly not putting him down. But Alistair Johnston's a Canadian international who's played at the highest level for us in Champions League consistently now. His signs of hunger don't appear to be waning at any point. He doesn't seem like that type of guy. So the enthusiasm that he'll bring tonight as well, just in the dressing room and just being there, I think is massive. You know, we lost a lot of that with Greg Taylor. Going by all accounts, he was quite vocal in the dressing room, as well as being a significant player in the team. So you add those two things together, and you know, suddenly you're looking around and there's more experience for tonight. Obviously, I'm aware that Sturm Graz beat Rangers in their game. They obviously beat a Rangers team that's in disarray. That might change now with the new manager. I'm certainly not suggesting that they're going to be as bad as they have been for the rest of this season, because who knows, this guy might get a tune out of them. But my big concern is with Hearts. And I've been saying it since the start of the season probably, and everyone has been sort of like, oh, you know, following up their praise of Hearts with, but they'll fall away. I've never said that. I've just there's a lot of things stacking up in terms of anniversaries and all the rest of it. What happened in 1986? We just got beat at Dens Park.
I know, JP. I know.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like there's a lot of things. Somebody said, I forget, it was a guy I know who's a Hearts fan, said something about, oh, big Stephen Presley's not done us this big a favour since whatever it was, and there was each picture of him with the Scottish Cup. Must have been when they beat Gretna. And you're thinking, right, the favours from ex-Hearts players who are managers of Dundee. It's possibly absolute codswallop, but who knows?
It's only abstract until it happens. You know, It is only abstract. I mean, will we be discussing next week, JP, when you're on a blooming Jamestown massacre? Do you think with Tony Bloom?
I said on the way up to Dundee on Sunday, when we were talking, me and my pal were talking about the Hearts game, and I said I would take a draw right now, because a draw, they'd be really disappointed with a draw, because they'll be wanting to beat us, because they'll see a wounded animal and think that they can put distance between us. But I draw, and that was before we lost to Dundee. So, and people might say now, oh, we need to go there and win. I'd say in this current situation that we find ourselves in, going there and not getting beat would be a result. And just till we get our house in order, until we get players back, and a team clicking, and the team isn't clicking just now, just as it wasn't clicking in 2023, but it did click. As you got into December that season, we started to put results together. And then obviously we get the signings in January, and things start to change for the second half of the season. But as it stands right now, we need to go out and get a striker that's going to score that level of goals that Adam Ida scored in the second half of the season, whether it's a loan like that was, with an option to buy, or whether it's going out and spending serious cash in January, one or the other. But if I'm pointing to a lack of goals that stretches back to 1993-1994 season, a season that we finished fourth, then they need no further evidence that they need to make things right in January. We cannot have a January transfer window where we go at the end of it, oh, we're really sorry, we tried to do it, it's just a really difficult window. We can't have any of that.
No, you're right. And by the way, JP, we need one of the best transfer windows in January that we've had, maybe the best, was in Angie's first season, where we bring in Matt O'Reilly, Dyson Maeda, Rio Tati, and Ideguchi came in. Yosuke Ideguchi came in. So 3 out of 4 ain't bad. We need at least as good as that in January, by the way. 3 out of 4 that actually contribute to the first team in a big way. That's what we're looking at, January. We don't do it very often. That's an anomaly. But that's what we need, JP. We might even need more than 3. Interestingly enough, we, during the period of domination, constantly called out the officiating in Scottish football. Why did we do that when we were winning? Because you know what? When we're going into Tynecastle, here is what you're going to be faced with. Stephen McLean, referee, brother of former Rangers player and a Rangers fan himself, Stephen McLean. I mean, it's just a fact, right? On the VAR, you've got David Dickinson, Rangers fan, confirmed, and Andrew Dallas, Motherwell fan. Right, so that's what you've got, right? That's what you're facing on Sunday as well. Why did we bang on about it when we were winning things at a canter? Because every single thing needs to be scrutinised on Sunday.
I mean, Tynecastle has not been a place that's been in any way kind to us in terms of decisions in recent years. You think
that season you spoke about, we went on a run and we ended up getting beat at Tynecastle 2-1. 2-0. Ida misses a penalty, Jan gets sent off, and the penalty would be Awata.
Aye, no, I'll never ever forget that day. But there was that. There was also the James Forrest, the non-handball penalty in the very first ever VAR game. That would have been the previous October. Would have been October 22. So yeah, Tynecastle has not been a happy hunting ground in terms of decisions. But if you're talking about motivation, you've got tonight to get through against to me anyway, relatively unknown Sturmgrat side. I haven't really investigated them in any major way beyond the fact that I know that they beat Rangers at their home stadium. I would like to think that the performance tonight helps us, build on something for Sunday. I don't subscribe to this idea of just like abandoning any interest in the Europa League because we need to focus on domestic. They usually sort of dovetail together. I would have thought the European performances.
I think so.
Into the Scottish. So what would it do for morale if we played a weakened team tonight and get beat 2-0 or something like we did against Braga? I mean, I'm still raging about the Braga game, and that was in the Europa League, and that was with a full strength team. Mainly because of the decision that we've still not had a real significant answer to as to why we didn't get that goal. But yeah, I certainly think that we should be looking to a good performance, hopeful result at the end of it, and take that into Sunday tonight, after tonight.
7 wins and 9 domestically for Sturm Graz this season. And in Europe, 2 wins and 4. They've not drawn a game. Somebody's winning the night, that's for sure. In the Champions League qualifiers, it was Bodo Glimt, previously referred to in the show, who knocked them out. And as you said, they beat Rangers 2-1, but Midtjylland beat them 2-0. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk everything from Tron to Sturm Graz with JP Mason, who did it from the hub, which is King Tut's Wawa Hut, the iconic venue in Glasgow. Thanks, every single one of you. The last comment today coming through, and it's Pluto Born, who is supporting the channel today. Before social media, fan communication was very, very hard. Thank you, Acsom, for making it easier and better. Your content off and on the field is superb. Well, what I would say is apologies for anyone who has sent me messages through any of the social media channels, or indeed via email, that I've not got back to you yet. It's just that I am working my way through that, and I will get back to everybody eventually. Hopefully, no like Ringo Starr, where you get a letter 30 years after you sent it. I will catch up eventually. Thanks, everybody, for supporting what we do. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll be live half an hour before the game kicks off on A Celtic State of Mind.